So there's been a lot of noise lately where a number of journalists and reporters and commentators are calling for Joe Biden to step aside, calling for him to not run for re-election in 2024. Cenk Uygur has been beating that drum for a while. There was a Washington Post writer, was it David Ignatius, who came out and said the same thing. James Carville even sort of hinted at it. And Bill Maher as well has now done a monologue where he makes this case. So I want to listen, and then I want to react and tell you what about this conversation gets under my skin.
And finally, new rule, someone has to convince President Biden that if he runs again, he's going to turn the country back over to Trump and go and go down in history as Ruth Bader Biden. The person who doesn't know when to quit and so does great damage to their party and their country. All of us who like Joe Biden have been struggling lately with the political situation in the Democratic Party. An incumbent we admire who acquitted himself well in a first term, but who even members of his own party don't want to see run for a second, despite a touching letter of recommendation from Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. I kid, they shouldn't have gotten shit for that. If you ask me, do I think Joe Biden can do the job of president? My answer is an unequivocal yes, he can do the job. Do I love everything? No, but that's every president. But government work is done in small, quiet rooms like the Oval Office. And in that setting, Joe's compassion and centuries of experience are pluses. And he's generally made good decisions that got us out of Afghanistan, handled Ukraine, kept the economy chugging, finally got us rebuilding infrastructure, returned a sense of normalcy. There's a term for Joe Biden, but not two. Because while he can do the job, what he can't do is run for it. Our campaign season is long, and it gets icy in New Hampshire. To those who say he beat Trump once, he'll do it again, I say things change. They always do. The parade moves on. 2024 is not 2020 in so many key ways, including, yes, Biden being 4 years older. You can be a national treasure and still be too old for the job. If I'm on a plane and the pilot says, "This is your captain, Buzz Aldrin," I'm getting off. Mitch McConnell has served Satan well. But when he starts buffering during a speech, and it appears his soul is leaving his body, it's time. I have made it a theme on this show to rail against ageism, the last acceptable prejudice in America. I've tried to make the argument that judging by age is wrong because we all age so differently. Some people are old when they're 45, and others are spry at 90. So it should always be a case-by-case basis. But the credibility of my argument against ageism rests on the honest calling out of people when it is time to go. That's what case-by-case means. At an event last weekend, Biden referred to LL Cool J as LLJ Cool J. Say what you want about Trump, but he remembers Kanye's name. Look, at some point, perception becomes reality. What matters is voters think Biden's too old. What matters is he's going to lose to Trump, who's almost the same age, but his age just doesn't read like Biden's. Maybe it's because Trump is insane. Maybe it's because he's always a ball of white-hot anger, but for whatever reason, he looks robust and Joe looks like his own skeletal remains.
All right, so you guys get the gist of it there. And now he's adding to the chorus of people who are all making the same argument. And look, on the one hand, I am sympathetic to this argument. Because if you truly believe that Trump and the Republicans are an existential threat, as I do, then yeah, you want to put your best foot forward. You don't want to roll the dice. You want to come correct and dot all your I's and cross all your T's and make sure that you can defeat the Republicans. So in a sense, I am sympathetic to this argument. But let's be clear. The argument is resting simply on the fact that Biden's 1,000 years old. So in other words, it's all over this optics stuff. It's all over this, intangible stuff. It's not at all about policy. And I think what frustrates me is that people who are Democrats or liberals or leftists, we like to make the point to people that, hey, you should be with us because we're the serious people, we're the policy people. That's what we care about first and foremost. And we can't, on the one hand, make that argument, and then while having the conversation about 2024, make declarative statements like, Biden can't win. When it's like, look, I hate to tell you, but all of us Bernie people were saying that during the Democratic primary in 2020. All of us were like, no, I don't think Biden can win. And then he went on to win. Now, also, let me point out, I did change my tune on that. As soon as we started getting general election polls and we were closer to the general, I actually predicted Biden would go on to win. But during the primary, I was making the same arguments as everybody else, that Biden can't win and Bernie's a better option. And I just see a lot of these same declarative statements this time around, as if it's like some sort of fact written into the laws of nature that it's just not possible for Joe Biden to win. And what frustrates me to no end about those points is, number one, you have no fucking idea. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Is it possible? Of course it's possible he wins. And they act like, no, it's not even possible. Well, of course it's possible. And the other thing is, in the entire conversation where you bring up all of these strikes against Biden, like his age, nobody brings up the fact that Trump was just found liable of fraud and there are 91 criminal charges against him at this very moment. Like, again, I'm sympathetic to the idea, hey, the optics aren't good. He's really old. He doesn't know whether he's coming or going. But it's like, oh, if only there was like a massive problem with the candidate on the other side, which might mitigate the downside of the age thing. If only he was running against, I don't know, a criminal, 91 criminal charges, just found liable of fraud. And I think the thing that gets under my skin the most is nobody who's making this argument against Biden is even bringing that up. They're not even bringing it up to then make an argument to dismiss it. They just don't bring up the fact that as much as you think Biden can't win, Biden can't win, Biden can't win, Biden can't win, by the same token, a guy with 91 criminal charges against him can't win. I mean, come on, guys. This is not that difficult. Yes, it's unprecedented. We have a presidential candidate who's basically a dusty carcass who's barely alive. That's unprecedented. It's also unprecedented on the other side for a guy that was just found liable of fraud and has 91 criminal charges and did a fake elector slate to try to end democracy. That's also kind of unprecedented now, isn't it? Because when Trump ran the last time, he hadn't done it yet. Right? There was no January 6th yet. Now we had the January 6th. We had the fake elector slate. We had the scheme to do a coup. So yeah, as bad as the age thing is, the optics of that, as much as he's struggling, as much as he's a decrepit carcass, on the other hand, you have an absolute criminal on the other side. And if you're not bringing that up in the context of having this conversation, I'm sorry, but it just feels incredibly disingenuous. Now, there's points beyond this that I haven't heard any of these people touch. All these people who are saying, Biden can't win. He can't win. Guys, in the midterms, everybody and their mother was telling me, everybody in the media, everybody in politics, everybody in our personal life, everybody was telling me, red wave, red wave, red wave, red wave, red wave. You go back and watch the video, and you look at what I said in response. My argument was, I don't know, man. I'm not sold. I'm agnostic. I don't know what's going to happen in the midterms. I don't know. But I'm not convinced on this red wave thing yet. And guess who was right? I was right. And there are reasons why the red wave didn't materialize. The Republicans were not running on kitchen table issues and economic stuff. They were leaning into like tough on crime stuff, for example, and anti-trans stuff. I didn't think that would land. I was right. And then beyond that, we just had Roe versus Wade get overturned. And the American people despised that. And right after Roe v. Wade was overturned, we're going to think, oh yeah, it's going to be a red wave in the midterms, even though the Republican Party squarely gets the blame for that, correctly so, because it was a Republican Supreme Court that did that. So not only did we not have a red wave in the midterms, but then also, I don't know if you guys have seen the numbers on these special elections that have been happening around the country since then. It's something like 24 of 28 elections since then, Democrats have outperformed the polls. So in other words, that dynamic of Democrats overperforming is still holding true from the midterms until today. Now, is it possible that changes? Yes, it is. But you can't declaratively state, oh, Biden can't win and the Democrats are going to struggle. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, the Democrats did better in the midterms than expected. The Democrats are doing better in special elections than anybody thought. And then also you still have this toxic brew of election denialism on the right, which is really hurting them and holding them back. Over half of the Republican candidates who ran in the midterms were election denialists, and that really bit them in the ass. the Carrie Lakes of the world, the Doug Mastrianos of the world. They screwed themselves. Trump's handpicked candidates screwed themselves. And so, look, again, I'm sympathetic to the argument, but when you make the argument, you better also bring up the issues with the other side and how, yes, it's unprecedented to have a guy this old who doesn't know where he is running, but it's also unprecedented to have a guy with 91 criminal charges against him who has perpetually underperformed along with the Republican Party since 2016. So there are massive issues on both sides, and when people bring up this argument against Biden, it's very declarative, and it's only bringing up the issues with Biden. And like I said, the biggest point here is we're supposed to be the policy people. So if your whole rant is based on the optics of it, and he's really old, it's like, okay, are you going to bring up in your rant any of the policy stuff? Now, to be fair to Maher, he did bring up the pulling out of Afghanistan, and he says, yeah, I didn't think he did all that bad a job. But if you're really concerned that Trump is an existential threat, Republicans could absolutely end democracy, and Biden is overwhelmingly likely to be the nominee, well, then doesn't the calculation become, well, actually, let me explain to you the things that did happen and how many of the things are good. 800,000 manufacturing jobs coming back to this country. By the way, a lot of those jobs are going to the swing states that are going to decide the next election. Maybe you should bring that up. Maybe you should bring up the new NLRB rule to give more people overtime pay. That's huge. Maybe you should bring up the NLRB rule to recognize unions if the boss tries to union bust. The most pro-labor ruling in our lifetimes happened under Joe Biden. Maybe you bring up, like Maher did, the pulling out of Afghanistan, reducing the drone war 90%. The fact that Biden did $15 minimum wage for federal contractors and employees, did red flag laws for guns, did the PACT Act, which was health care for veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits, which every single Republican voted against. Maybe you bring up the 1% tax on stock buyback, which is taxing the wealthy, which is a good thing. Maybe you bring up the cracking down on wealthy tax cheats for people who make over $400,000 a year. That's absolutely a positive thing. That's absolutely a popular thing. Maybe you bring up the lowering of some prescription drug prices, or the lowering the scheduling of weed from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, or the capping Medicare price negotiations at $2,000 out of pocket. That saves people $288 billion. Beefing up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to crack down on the financial institutions that are screwing people on a daily basis. Right? So I think what bothers me about this conversation, very few people are bringing up policy and telling you the full record. That bothers me. And also, if you're going to talk about all the problems with Biden, it is dishonest to not bring up also the unprecedentedly negative things against Trump. The 91 criminal charges, just found liable of fraud, still talking about overturning the election, saying he wants to suspend the Constitution. And so then if the question becomes this really old geezer and the guy who says he wants to suspend the Constitution and try to do a literal coup last time, maybe it's not as declarative as everybody makes it out to be. Oh, he can't win, he can't win, he can't win. You don't know that. He definitely could win. The point of agreement that I'll end on is it's way too close for our comfort, right? Now, so if Biden were to step aside, I've told you guys this before, I'll tell you again. If Biden were to step aside, there are two scenarios that scare me to death. Kamala Harris or Mayor Pete. I think they are less likely to win than Joe Biden. Now, I think you can make an argument for Tim Walz, Josh Shapiro, J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom. I think those people have a better chance to win electorally. But then there's also the conversation of, like, if they hop in out of nowhere and Biden steps aside, they have no momentum and they don't have nearly as high name recognition, right? And so even that's a gamble. Even taking the ideal candidate, getting rid of Biden, putting in the ideal candidate. They don't have as much name recognition. They don't have as much momentum. And have to try to convince the country in a short time frame, it's me, right? So even in a scenario that I think could go better than a Biden, like all those people I just listed, it's still not a guarantee. So it's this, like, guys, this is a complex, complicated, nuanced, really long conversation. And I think the thing that's bugging me is the certitude of everybody. Oh, he definitely can't win. I don't even say that about Trump, even though I think it's very unlikely Trump can win because of the 91 criminal charges and trying to do a coup. I still don't even say that about Trump. I still think there's a chance he can win. And by the same token, I think Biden also can win. So I agree, it's too close for comfort, but also it's not helping to make these weird declarative statements acting like you know. You don't have a crystal ball. And the difference is, I do. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.